Viewers like you make this program possible. Support your local PBS station.
The French Chef is made possible by a grant from Safeway stores.
There are all kinds of soufflés in this world, from fish and cheese to nuts. Some like them hot. Some like them cold, like this luscious concoction, a soufflé glacé Bavarois. We're doing it today on the French Chef. Welcome to the French Chef. I'm Julia Child. Today we are going to do this lovely cold soufflé. That's the modern name for a Bavarian cream, which I think is one of the oldest of the cold desserts. It was invented before we had ice creams and frozen mousses. And a Bavarian cream is a luscious custard with cream in it, which has just enough gelatin in it to hold it together. And beautifully seasoned and very carefully made. It's just velvet on the tongue. And it has just enough gelatin so it'll hold up either in the mold or out of it, like this. And I'm going to make the classical Bavarois à l'orange because I like it the best. That's orange Bavarian cream. And I think you'll like it very much too. And one of the nice things about these Bavarian creams is that you can get them all done and keep them in the refrigerator. You can even do them a day before you're going to serve them. Now, as this is an orange Bavarian cream, we have fresh oranges, and you'll need 5 or 6 lovely, great, big, fresh, juicy ones. And also, we're going to have about 2/3 of a cup of orange juice. And then we have gelatin, because it's the gelatin that holds it together. And be sure when you're getting the gelatin, get these little packages that say unflavored gelatin. And we're going to make 8 cups, and that will serve 8 to 10 people, depending on their appetites. And we're going to use 1.5 packages of gelatin. And one package is about 1 tablespoon. And we're going to soften it in the orange juice. And then, if you're making this for the first time, you may want to use 2 packages of gelatin, but it's much more delicate if you can use 1.5. So if one package is 1 tablespoon, half a package is half a tablespoon, and as there are 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon, we want 1 1/2 teaspoons. So you put it in your teaspoon and level it out, and then measure your half teaspoon. And the reason that you soften your gelatin first, because it's sort of granular, and if you soften it first in a cool liquid, then it will completely dissolve when you put it in a hot liquid. And then we have to have our orange flavoring, and you get the most delicious orange flavoring if you take a great big bright orange and rub sugar lumps over it like this. And you want to rub 2 sugar lumps over 2 oranges, and you want to rub it hard so that you get all of this lovely oil out of it, and that gives you more of your orange flavor. And the beauty of this dessert is having the absolutely fresh, natural flavor of the best oranges. And then you see the difference between a sugar lump that hasn't been rubbed and one that has been rubbed. And we want 2 full sugar lumps, and you break them up somehow in a bowl or anything like that, and then they're to go into 1 1/2 cups of hot milk, and they will melt there in the milk while the milk is heating up. And then we want to have the grated rind of 2 oranges, and I have already grated it, and that just goes also into the hot milk. And that just sort of steeps, and then you get more orange flavor. And then we're going to have 7 egg yolks. This is going to make 8 cups, so we're going to have 7 egg yolks that make our custard sauce. And for breaking egg yolks, I just thought I just might separate eggs once. You break them on a sharp edge and then pull them gently apart and just shift the yolk back and forth, and the white falls off. And there is one yolk. And then the French, who always are very careful about saving everything, if they're breaking a dozen eggs, they'll take their finger and get down on that little drop of egg white that's left over. And if you break about 5 dozen eggs, you'll save about a teaspoon of egg white. Now here's another method. This is a method that my husband likes very much. He's a painter and he likes to paint in egg tempera. You just break it in your hands like that. That works out very nicely. And then I already have 5 egg yolks in here, and if you break your eggs ahead of time, be sure that you put them in a covered jar so that they don't crust over. And now we have, those are 7 egg yolks, that's almost a half cup. And put these into a pan or a mixing bowl, and then they're going to have sugar beaten into them. And I want to have 1 cup of sugar, and when you add your sugar to egg yolks and you're going to beat them up, you want to add the sugar gradually. You could beat this in an electric mixer perfectly well, but if you add all your sugar at once, you may turn your egg yolks granular. So see, I'm just beating that in rather gradually. And if you're doing this in an electric mixer, be sure that you watch what you're doing, because if you just go off and do something and you let the mixer go and go and go, and you can overbeat your egg yolks and sugar, and that again may turn your egg yolks granular. And this you want to beat until it becomes sort of pale and lemon color. That's about a minute or so. I've saved out 2 tablespoons from my 1 cup of sugar because I'm going to add that later, as you will see. And this you have to beat for about a minute or 2, and if you have a great big whip, then it turns lemon colored more quickly. And the reason you want it to beat it, because it seems to prepare the egg yolks for being heated so that they don't turn granular or become sort of upset over being heated. It just is a preparation for what's going to happen to them later on. And then we're also going to beat in 2 teaspoons of cornstarch. And the cornstarch you don't have to use. You can put in 9 egg yolks instead of 7. But the cornstarch, because these are going to be heated into a custard sauce, will help to prevent the egg yolks from curdling or scrambling. And then that gets thoroughly beaten in. And then we have our 1 1/2 cups of hot milk with the orange sugar and the orange rind in. And that goes in very, very gradually. This is another point when you're dealing with egg yolks. If you're going to heat them up, you always add a little of your hot liquid to them very gradually, because the idea is that the more gradually you heat them, the more evenly they will cook. Because your whole problem in making a custard sauce with egg yolks is that you do not want the custard to curdle, or the egg yolks to turn into scrambled eggs. And then after you have the milk beaten in, you then stir it over moderate heat until the sauce thickens. And this is your only trick in making your custard sauce, is that you have to heat it gradually so that it will gradually thicken. And you're going to see, look at now on this wooden spoon, you see this is still a very thin mass, and you want to cook it until it coats the spoon, and you're going to see the difference as it gradually heats up. Now this pan that I'm using is one of these new ones which has a stainless steel interior and an aluminum exterior, and it's not a heavy pan, but the aluminum exterior is a very good heat conductor. Stainless steel by yourself, as you know, is just a very, very poor heat conductor, and it's awfully easy to burn things because it just heats where the heat is. But now with the aluminum on the outside, you have your heat conducted all around the pan, and I think they're very satisfactory. They're quite expensive. This one is about $8. It's a 3-quart pan, but it's the kind of thing that will last all the rest of your life with reasonable care. You see, I'm continually stirring this and keep taking it sort of on and off the heat, and it's now beginning to send up a little bit of steam, but it is not yet thickened. And in this Bavarian cream, you have to keep stirring your custard until it does thicken, because we're using so little gelatin. If you haven't cooked your egg yolks properly so they do their thickening, then you would have to use more gelatin, and then you would end up with one of those terrible gelatin desserts that taste like a school lunch. I think that's one reason a lot of people think, oh, Bavarian cream, how horrible, because they're used to this badly made stuff that has an awful lot of gelatin to hold it together. So you just have to have the courage to cook it long enough. And you can use a thermometer, but I used a thermometer for the souffle that you saw in the icebox, and you can't really tell about the thermometer because sometimes they're not accurate, and then sometimes it's supposed to get thickened at about 170, but last night when I was making this one, it didn't thicken until it was about 175, so you cannot rely on the thermometer. You've got to rely on the way it looks. Now, I'm taking it off. You see how that is lying on the spoon there? That's the way it should be, and you can see also the steam coming up. And if you put your finger in, it's too hot for your finger. Remember, the finger is a very good test. Just put it in, and if it's just too hot for it to hold in there, it's just about done. But you see how that's holding on the spoon, and it is going to thicken up more as it cools. And then, when you have your sauce done, so it's thick enough so it coats the spoon, you have your gelatin. Now look at how the gelatin is now. You see that it has really softened and is beginning to turn into gelatin. So you put that immediately into your hot cream, because you have to be sure that the gelatin has completely melted and dissolved. And if you don't put it into a hot cream, you'll have those little granules in your cream, and this is supposed to be just an absolute ambrosia and velvet. So stir it around enough until you're absolutely sure that all the granules have dissolved. And if you've softened it first, and it only takes about 5 minutes, then it dissolves very quickly in your hot cream. And then you would let this cool. You would either put it in the refrigerator or you can stir it over ice, because I want you to see the whole process. I'm going to stir it over ice. And while this is cooling off, I'm going to make the egg whites. This is a very nice recipe because it has, it's much lighter than the usual one, which has the cream and then, well, I haven't got my egg whites. I've got here 5 egg whites. And this makes a much lighter one. If it were nothing but cream and the custard sauce, it would be very heavy, but this is going to have the 5 egg whites, and that makes a much lighter cream. And I'm doing this in the electric mixer, just to show that I do approve of electric mixers on occasion. I started at moderate speed, and as soon as it has begun to foam up, then turn it on fast, and also put in, we've got 5 whites, so put in about a 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar. And that cream of tartar is going to prevent the egg whites from collapsing after they have been beaten. And then also, just to give a little extra flavor, put in about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Then turn it on high. if you're using an unlined copper bowl, you don't have to use the cream of tartar. And always when you're beating the egg whites, be sure that you use your small bowl because they mount faster. And now as soon as they've begun to form soft peaks, then add in that extra tablespoon or two of sugar that was saved over from the other sugar. And the addition of the sugar also allows them to mount a little more stiffly. And then they're done when they hold themselves like that. See? That means that they're done. You don't want to go beyond that stage. And then the egg whites get folded into the cream. Let's see how this cream is doing now. You can fold the egg whites right into the hot cream, but we're going to fold the hot custard cream button. I'm going to take it out. Because egg whites, as a matter of fact, go even better into something that's hot because that sort of gives them more of a puff and a partial cooking. But if you're adding whipped cream, you always have to be sure that your mixture is cold or the cream will collapse. And then fold these egg whites right in. Remember, this folding system is the spoon goes down and around and out like this, and just fold very rapidly. And then you would put this in the refrigerator after you have this all folded in. And then you would fold it about every 15 or 20 minutes. Because if you don't continually fold it, the custard cream and the gelatin, which are heavy, sink down to the bottom. And until it is almost set, you have to keep folding it. And then you have to just sort of keep your eye on it. And when it is almost set, and you've kept your folding so that it's all nicely mixed up, you then add your whipped cream. I want to be sure that this is cold, so now I can add the whipped cream. So I'll get the whipped cream, which is in the refrigerator. Now this, I want you to notice this whipped cream carefully. This has been beaten by hand in a chilled bowl with a chilled beater, and this is 1 cup of heavy cream or whipping cream, and this is beaten to what the French called crème chantilly. It's a very light cream, and I'm going to have to beat it up just a little tiny bit more, but it's done when the beater leaves light traces on the surface. And you'll never have any trouble with whipped cream if you always whip it in a cold bowl with a cold beater and the cream is chilled. And if it's a hot day, just set your bowl over ice. Now notice, you see that the cream just sort of barely holds its shape. And this is a perfectly lovely quality, and the French rarely, if ever, whip cream until it's terribly stiff because it just doesn't have that delicious quality that it should. And so, now this is cold, and you're sure that you have folded it enough so that your custard hasn't sunk to the bottom, and then you put your cream in. You see, the whole idea of this is to make it just as light and ambrosial as possible. And then we also have some orange liqueur. You can omit the orange liqueur if you like, but it has a lovely taste to it. And we want about 2 tablespoons of orange liqueur in. And if you're going to use orange liqueur at all, be sure that you get a very good quality. Because there's nothing worse than making this lovely dessert and then finding that that if you've used a bad quality of orange liqueur, and it just spoils the whole thing. And the beauty of this dessert is in the perfect freshness of the oranges and the absolute care that you've taken in every step to make it. As you can see, it's not very difficult if you just watch what you're doing and are careful with what you're doing. And now we're ready to mold it. And this is mold is going to be molded in a souffle dish so that the top is going to stick out. And to do this, use, well, any kind of a dish that will look nice for serving. If you just have an old tin dish, you can cover the dish after your cream has set. You can cover it with a napkin and it will look very nice. You can really use anything you want. Now we have 8 cups in all, and this is a 6-cup souffle mold, so we're going to put a wax paper around the top of it so that the cream can go in and stick up on top of and be held together by the wax paper. You don't have to oil this wax paper or anything, because it just peels off when you're through. And then there's a piece of string. This gets tied up. In some of the old recipes, they tell you to oil the mold with oil of sweet almonds, and I went to a drugstore and got some oil of sweet almonds, and I oiled one of those fancy molds, and I don't know, the oil had a sort of a horrid taste, and I could taste it all through the dessert. And I don't think these need to be oiled at all, because this, of course, isn't going to be unmolded. Now there's your paper color, and then you simply pour your cream right into the mold, and it comes up about 2 or 3 inches up over the top. And then that goes into the refrigerator, and it will, you really should let it set for, really to be on the safe side, for about 5 or 6 hours, I think. It probably would set in 4, but wouldn't like to take the risk of serving it and then have it gradually collapse. See, there's our other one, which was molded in exactly the same way. And then I have another here, which has been molded in a mold, and I'm going to unmold it. And that's the traditional way of serving the Bavarian cream. And that's very, well, they're both very dramatic. And this one has just a piece of paper on the top, which will just peel off. See, that hasn't been oiled or anything. You can see that it just peels right off, and when you peel it off your souffle mold, you do exactly the same thing. And then you take a long, thin knife, and you very carefully go all the way down the edge. This one I've molded in a charlotte mold because, see, this is about 4 inches high, and it makes a much more dramatic, unmolded dessert. These you can get at most of the French import houses, and this is a 2-quart charlotte. And if you get a charlotte, be sure that you get one that's a sort of a heavy metal that has a tin wash on them. I've seen some that are just sort of tin, and they're only good for this kind of a dessert, but if you in the regular charlotte, you can cook with it. Now this is very hot water, and I'm going to leave it in for 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5 seconds, and I hope it's going to unmold. Then turn the dish upside down on it. Goes over. Hasn't quite come out. This is sort of one of these things that you can go on doing for some time, but it's better not to put it in the hot water too long. It's better to sort of do it 2 or 3 times. So it takes a little bit of time for it to heat up, and go around it again with your knife. There it comes. Then you have orange segments, which is going to be decorated with. I think actually if I hadn't been in such a hurry with that the first time, if I'd left it, and then it would probably have come down by itself, but it's going to have orange segments around it, so that will cover this up and it will look a little bit like a cream sauce anyway. You always have to make allowances for things. And now for orange segments, and this is something, if you're going to, knead the orange segments with this, but be sure that you have the freshest, nicest navel oranges. And then just, you see where I cut the two ends off and then cut all around. And then take your knife and cut between the segments like that so that there's no skin at all showing. And then, and these you should not do too far ahead because it should stay absolutely fresh. And then put a little bit, if you like, a little bit of orange liqueur on and a little bit of sugar and let them stand for about 10 minutes or so. And put a little bit of sugar on. And then it takes about 10 minutes for the sugar to dissolve. And then baste them with this. And then you arrange your orange segments around your dessert, and you can arrange it on top of it. And this is really, it's so fresh and lovely tasting. But you have to be sure that your oranges are good. And when you pick them out, be sure that you pick ones that are bright and firm. If you have sort of an old withered skin, they just are not good. I mean, if you can't find the right kind of an orange, do another type of recipe, and then you can put some oranges on top. And there, that's all ready to serve. As you can see, that is not a complicated thing. The important thing is to do it very carefully and have delicious ingredients. And I'm going to serve it so that you'll see how it looks. And it's just as tender and velvety a dessert as you can possibly imagine. You can have an extra bowl of orange segments to serve along with it because it has such a lovely fresh taste. And now I'm going to serve the souffle. You just would cut right down into it. And that has just the same lovely tender quality as the Bavarian cream. And with that, I think you would also serve a bowl of orange segments. And don't count on leftovers, because usually people come back for second helpings and even thirds. But if you do have any leftovers, you just cover the cream with a bowl and put it back in the refrigerator, and it will keep very nicely for a day or two. And there are all kinds of other flavors, of course. This is the sort of general method of how to make the Bavarian cream. And remember, it's very important that you cook your custard sauce properly. So you can see with perfectly ordinary ingredients and a measure of loving care, you can really create a dessert that's a masterpiece. And that's all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit.
Julia Child is co-author of the book Mastering the Art of French Cooking.